Hello guys, how are you?
I'm Hardeep Singh. Welcome back to your own YouTube channel. IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test, and speaking, you got guesswork. Please guys participate in everyday listening and reading practice test to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Press the bell icon for the upcoming notifications. Don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams.
Part 1. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5.
Oh, hi, Maggie, it's Greg.
Hi, Greg.
I'm phoning to check some information about some of the staff. I'm putting all the staff data into new files, and I noticed that I don't have files for 2 people. I think you might have them.
Oh, really? What are their names?
Peter Austin and Jane Moore.
Let me have a look. Yes, I've got them here. Shall I send them to you?
No, you don't need to. Just give me the information now. I can write it on some new files. I don't really need the photos if you've got photos there.
OK. Well, Peter Austin first.
Now, is that Austin with an I or Austin with an E?
It's Austin, and his address is 110 Argyle Street, Tunbridge Wells, Kent, TN3 5RQ.
110?
Uh-huh.
And his phone number?
It's 07984 645 792.
OK. And how old is he?
He's 47.
47. And what about his marital status?
He's married. There's a note here that he has 3 children, 2 boys and a girl.
OK. And finally, when did he join the company?
He started with ESCO in August 2003.
Thanks, Maggie.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10.
Now, what about Jane?
Her name's Jane Moore, that's Moore, and her address is 72 Cedar Road, Crowborough, Kent, CR3 5RQ.
CR3 and what, sorry?
CR3 5RQ.
And how do you spell cedar?
CEDAR. Her phone number is 07984 650 396.
07984 650 396.
Yes. Now, she's 22 and she's single.
OK.
And she started with ESCO in 2005, February 2005.
Right, thanks, Maggie. That's very helpful. Goodbye now.
Goodbye.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
You will hear a tour guide speaking to a group of tourists who are visiting a part of New Zealand called Rotorua.
First, You have some time to look at questions 11 to 14.
Hello everyone, and I'd like to welcome you all to Rotorua, one of the most famous destinations in New Zealand, where we have a long history of welcoming visitors. I'd like to explain a bit about the geography of this amazing region, famous for its geothermal activity, and tell you what we've planned for your stay. Well, if you'd like to have a look at the map of the region that's in your welcome pack, if you find Lake Rotorua on the top left, the big triangular lake, we've just driven down along State Highway 5, SH5, down the western side of the lake, and then we turned off through the town, and we're here at the Lakes Motel just around the southern tip of the lake, okay? Now tomorrow we'll be heading off along SH30 in the opposite direction from the town, towards Lake Rotoita, where we'll be visiting the Hells Gate Thermal Reserve. This is the area between the SH30 road and the lake, and I'll be telling you more about this in a minute. We'll then be returning to the motel, and in the afternoon we'll be visiting the town of Rotorua itself and also the Arts and Crafts Institute, which is just along the SH30 from the motel where it meets the SH5 outside the town. Now if you look directly out of the motel towards the southeast, in the opposite direction to Lake Rotorua, you can just see the peak of Mount Tarawera, and the day after tomorrow we'll be visiting the volcanic valley which was formed when this last erupted. We'll drive down the SH5 and then head off towards Lake Rotomahana. The valley's on the opposite side of the lake from the mountain, so you can see what a powerful effect the eruption had. There's also an interesting archaeological site, a village buried by the same eruption on the western shores of Lake Tarawera, just to the north, but I'm afraid we won't have time to visit that as a group, although you may wish to go there on your own. However, on the way back towards Rotorua along the SH5, we'll be stopping at Tamaki Village, which is on the main road about 12 kilometres outside town.
Before you hear the rest of the programme, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20.
So now let me tell you a bit more about these attractions. Just driving past the lake and through the town, I'm sure you've realised this is somewhere quite different from anywhere else in the world. So tomorrow, we'll start by visiting Hells Gate Thermal Reserve. This is the most active area of the region volcanically, and you'll see New Zealand's largest boiling whirlpool, where the water is actually 100 degrees centigrade, together with the largest hot waterfall in the southern hemisphere, where it's a more comfortable 40 degrees centigrade. Just right for a hot shower. Entry is just $12 for adults and $6 for children. We'll come back to the motel for lunch, after which we'll visit the Arts and Crafts Institute, where you can learn about Maori people who lived here before the Europeans came. There's a display of Maori carving, showing this traditional skill at its most impressive, and exhibitions where you can learn about the use of geothermal waters for cooking food and for medicinal purposes. Entry is free and you'll find plenty to do there for the whole afternoon. The following day we'll be visiting another highlight of the region, the Volcanic Valley. This is a very new part of New Zealand. The valley was formed less than 150 years ago in 1886 when Mount Tarawera erupted violently, completely destroying the beautiful pink and white terraces that used to attract tourists to the region. After lunch you can take a boat trip to see the volcanic activity at the edge of the lake. That's $25 for adults and $5 for children. We'll then be spending the afternoon learning more about traditional Maori life and pre-European New Zealand at Tamaki Village. As you walk around this recreated village, your Maori guide will tell you more about this traditional culture, and as the sun sets, you can enjoy a traditionally cooked feast known as the hangi. That's Hangi, consisting of meat and vegetables cooked over hot stones, which are placed in a hole in the ground and covered with earth. And there's no extra charge for this. It's all included in the basic cost of your holiday. Now, does anyone have any questions?
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
You will hear part of a lecture about a place called Kubapidi.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26.
Good afternoon. Today, we're continuing this series of talks on the development of the Australian outback with a look at Kubapidi, the desert town of opal mines and underground living, which lies 860 kilometres north of Adelaide and 690 south of Alice Springs. The inaccessibility, harsh climate and almost total lack of water made it a highly unlikely place for human habitation. But that all started to change in 1915 with the discovery there of opals, the precious stones which seem to change colour according to their surroundings. Settlements were established following the First World War, when soldiers returning from the trenches of France brought with them the techniques of living below ground in dugouts. The depression of the 1920s and 30s led to many prospectors leaving, but the town boomed again in the late 1940s when shallow new opal fields were discovered, and immigrants from Europe arrived in large numbers after the Second World War. It must be remembered, though, just how hostile conditions were. Daytime summer temperatures reached well over 50 degrees centigrade. Winter nights were bitterly cold, and dense dust storms regularly blanketed the town. To cope with this, more and more people began living in disused mines and purpose-built subterranean houses, where the temperature remains at a comfortable 25 degrees all year round, so that eventually around 70% of the town's inhabitants had made their homes beneath the surface. This led to the construction of hotels and even churches below ground, as well as an entire underground shopping centre, the only one in the world.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30.
Perhaps not surprisingly, this has now led to the emergence of a secondary industry, tourism. Increasing numbers of visitors come to see the tunnels and the caves with their ventilation shafts, the weird machines lying about in the town, and, just beyond it in the scorched red desert, the conical hills thrown up by the world's biggest opal mines. It's a logical stopping place for travellers too. The nearest town to Kubapidi is Woomera, in the prohibited area once used for launching space rockets, but even that is an enormous distance away. Within the town itself, there are plenty of hotel rooms and a number of ethnic restaurants. Remember that Coober Pedy is one of the most multicultural places in Australia, with an estimated 45 nationalities represented, and its very own Opal Museum. A short distance from town, there's a section of the enormous barrier that runs thousands of kilometres across the country, the Dingo Fence, which is meant to keep these predatory wild dogs out of the sheep farming areas. Another attraction just outside town are the sets of various films made there, including Mad Max 3, as well as The Red Planet and Until the End of the World. Names that reflect the harshness of the terrain and temperatures there. The name Coober Pedy, incidentally, comes from an Aboriginal expression meaning white man's hole in the ground. Next, I'd like to go on to talk about Broken Hill, another mining town, but one that...
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Listen to the following talk between two friends and answer the questions
31 to 40.
Do you know what, Tom? It won't be long before we'll all be travelling to space in a cable car.
A cable car? What do you mean? A sort of skylift?
Well, yes, I suppose so.
You must be joking. Where on earth did you get that idea from?
Oh, I've just been reading it in a book called Apes to Astronauts by Adrian Berry. He's the science correspondent of the Daily Telegraph, so he should know what he's talking about. He says... Wait a minute, I've got it here, page 28. A cable car to the heavens.
Oh, honestly, Jane, you surely don't believe all that stuff you read in those sci-fi books?
It's not science fiction, it's a fact. Hang on, I'll read you what he says. The space writer Arthur C. Clarke, to whose inspiration we owe the communications satellite, recently outlined a proposal for a new means of space travel, which, he admitted, is so outrageous that many of you may consider it not even science fiction, but pure fantasy. Shall I go on?
No, just tell me how he thinks it could be done.
Well, it sounds quite simple, really. One end of a cable, 23,000 miles long.
How long?
23,000 miles. Do listen. One end of a cable, 23,000 miles long, would be attached to a point on the Earth's equator, and the other to a satellite in geostationary orbit.
So?
The cable would be absolutely tight between the 2 points, and the elevator would travel up and down, carrying people and freight. According to Arthur Clarke, it's the only way to travel in space without using rocket engines, which would make it much more economical. I wonder if it would be more comfortable.
It sounds pretty uncomfortable to me, and heaven knows what speed it would be travelling at. What would happen if the cable broke?
Oh, he explains all that. Apparently, the most likely place for it to break would be at or near the ground. And if that happened, it wouldn't fall down, it would fall upwards.
Upwards? Yes, I suppose it would.
Yes. Sounds funny, doesn't it? Something falling upwards. Anyway, it wouldn't matter too much either if the cable broke away from the high end. It'd remain rigid until it could be reattached to the satellite. I don't quite see why.
Well, it would be the pull of gravity from above. Anyway, who'd want to be stuck in an elevator attached to a rigid cable thousands of miles up in space? I suppose he doesn't say what would happen if it broke in the middle.
Actually, he does. He says it would be dangerous if the break occurred at any altitude up to 15,000 miles because the bit attached to the Earth would... what does he say? Oh, yes. Collapse and wrap itself around the equator like a whiplash.
Whiplash?
You know, the long bit of cord or leather on a whip. Anyway, even that would only be really catastrophic if the cable was made of steel or some other metal. Metals are much too heavy. The cable would have to be made of some material capable of suspension without snapping.
But I thought you said the cable would be 23,000 miles long.
I did, but the 3,000-mile breaking length is because of gravity.
Well, all I can say is you'll never catch me going to space in a cable car. I'd rather keep my feet on the ground, thank you very much.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
So guys, don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test and speaking, you got guesswork. Please guys, participate in everyday new IELTS listening and reading practice tests to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. For more IELTS material, visit my official website www.ieltsupdatesandrecentexams.com. The link is given below in the description. If you need PDF files of latest IELTS material, then please join my Telegram channel. So guys, please write your score below the comment section. Again, thanks for listening. God bless you all guys. Stay tuned, stay safe.